Leon Bailey has just agreed a £30 million move to Aston Villa from Bayer Leverkusen. While a major target for Everton this summer, the club's major FFP restrictions allowed the Villains to pit them to the signing. In this video, I'll propose some options that the club could look to in Bailey's stead. First, to understand the profile of player Everton should look to, we have to first look at Leon himself, despite the pain it might cause Evertonians. As a left-footed player playing off the right, Bailey scored 15 goals and assisted 11 times by Leverkusen in the 2020-21 season. Here are a few key metrics that I believe characterise the direct and pacey style of play that he embodies. So first off is completed dribbles, with Bailey making 3.33 per 90, which is actually the 92nd percentile in Europe's top 5 leagues. He also has 1.66 carries into the box per 90, which again at 87th percentile is quite high. Not only that, it seems like Bailey has quite good final product, getting 0.61 non-penalty XG plus expected assists per 90 and 2.03 key passes, and also quite surprisingly, and in a way that I think would have actually benefited Everton quite a lot, is 3.56 crosses per 90, which puts him in the 92nd percentile in Europe's top 5 leagues as well. So whilst that might make hard reading, it gives us a good platform for having a look at other players that might provide a similar level of output for Everton. Alright, so our first alternative is Ajax's David Neres, who I'd characterise as the safe-ish, as safe as anyone coming from the Dutch league can be. Cough cough Davy Klaassen. And this is what I would classify as like the Marcel Brands pick. So David Neres is at a good age at 24. So according to Transfermarkt, David Neres would cost approximately 27 million euros. However, with only 2 years on his contract, I think we could probably get him for cheaper. And I think Ajax would be looking to sell him this year with Antony coming through, who, let's be honest, looks like a better player than Neres. And then let's have a look at his stats. So just a forewarning, these do only come from European competitions, so it's a bit of a small sample size. But from what we can see, Neres is a bit less of a ball carrier than Leon Bailey, with 1.78 dribbles and 1.07 carries into the box per 90, which are reasonably lower, but still decent. However, I think he seems to be much more of a creative influence, with, you could even argue, better final product than Leon Bailey. From the limited numbers we do have, it puts him at 0.44 expected assists per 90, which is the 99th percentile, and he's only behind Di Maria in that metric. And then also his non-penalty XG and XA puts him in the 98th percentile at 0.73. On top of that, he also has a much better work rate defensively than Leon Bailey, with 2.72 tackles and interceptions. And that would probably suit a Rafa Benitez side a lot better, with Neres likely playing the right midfield role in a 4-2-3-1, rather than the 4-3-3 that Bailey would be much better suited to. Alright, so the next player we're going to be talking about is Burnley's Dwight McNeil, who I'd characterise as the Benitez Premier League proven signing, and he's actually already been linked quite heavily to Everton this summer. So McNeil's quite young at only 21, and according to Transfermarkt, he would likely command a fee of about £20 million. However, I think he's likely to cost more, with 3 years still remaining on his contract, with an additional option to extend for another year. And he's also an integral part of Sean Dyche's Burnley side that are quite lacking in creative quality, which McNeil provides. So in possession, McNeil's also not quite the dynamic winger that Bailey is, making a respectable 1.94 dribbles per 90 and only 0.62 carries into the box per 90. In regards to end product, His non-penalty XG and XA is quite low. He's in the bottom 9th percentile in the Premier League with only 0.22. And he also middles with about 1.47 key passes. However, McNeil is actually a quite good crosser of the ball, which might play to Everton's strengths with Calvert-Lewin up top, making 3.34 crosses into the box, which is in the 89th percentile. One thing that might mitigate McNeil's low attacking numbers is Sean Dyche's conservative system, so I would take these numbers with a bit of a pinch of salt. Alright, so the next option is Romain Favre from Brest. I would classify him as the cheap gamble option. At 23 years old, he just had his breakout season in the French League, scoring 6 and assisting 5 for Brest. He's estimated by Transfermarkt to cost about 12 million, and with the financial struggles of French clubs, we might even be able to get him for a lower sum. He's much more of a wide midfielder than an attacking winger, like Bailey. He can play on the left and centrally as well, and is quite good on set pieces. In possession, he has 2.77 dribbles per 90 at a very high 66.4 completion rate. He has 0.56 carries into the penalty area, but also has extremely high progressive running numbers. In terms of end product, he has quite low cross numbers at 1.43. He has the highest of all the options in terms of key passes with 1.96 per 90. His non-penalty XG plus XA is pretty average at 0.37. These two numbers, key passes and non-penalty XG plus expected assists, are probably off the back of the fact that he takes set pieces where his players might get a head on the ball, which would count as a key pass, but would also have quite a low XG. So that might explain why he's so high in one metric and quite average in the other. Favre's also very active defensively with 3.11 tackles and interceptions, which puts him in the 91st percentile in Europe's top 5 leagues. This is something that Rafa Benitez would probably be a huge fan of. Alright, so our next option, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, but it's there on the screen for you to see. I'd classify him as a wildcard option with extremely high potential and resale value. So he's 20 years old and can play off the left and right. Plays for Rubin Kazan in the Russian Premier League and can play with both feet, which I think it makes him quite a versatile option. Last season he scored and assisted 4 goals, and unfortunately I don't have the XG and expected assist values for him. Transfermarkt values him at £16.2 million, and he has 3 years left on his deal, which would possibly make getting a transfer quite expensive this summer. In possession, he's an extremely pacey and tricky winger, making 4.01 dribbles per 90, which is a total higher than Leon Bailey. And unfortunately, we have a lack of statistics on his entries into the box per 90. In terms of end product, again, don't have data on expected goals, but his actual goals plus assists per 90 were 0.41, which is a very respectable total. In terms of creation, he has a pretty reasonable 1.66 key passes per 90 and 2.32 crosses per 90. For such a tricky winger, he also has quite a decent work rate with 2.36 tackles and interceptions per 90. Last but not least, we have Samuel Chukwueze from Villarreal. And I classify him as a top 5 European League proven player, and is probably the closest in profile to Leon Bailey. So he's 22 years old and he plays off the right for Villarreal. Last season he scored 5 and assisted 7 in all comps, which is a pretty reasonable total. He's currently valued for £18 million with only 2 years left on his deal, which means that Villarreal are probably going to look to sell him this summer. The only concern I have is that he's recently had surgery on his hamstring, which might become a recurring problem. In possession, Chukwueze is another extremely pacey and tricky winger. His numbers in possession eclipse those of Bailey, but not of Kvaratskhelia. But Chukwueze makes 3.51 dribbles per 90 and 2.32 carries into the box, which puts him in the 95th and 97th percentiles for each metric in Europe's top 5 leagues. In terms of final product, Chukwueze has 0.45 non-penalty XG plus XA per 90, which places him in the 70th percentile in Europe, which is pretty reasonable. And he has a more average 1.65 key passes per 90. He also has fairly decent cross numbers, making 2.53 per 90. Out of possession, Chukwueze has the lowest of all the options in terms of defensive numbers, with 1.6 tackles and interceptions, which is about the same as Leon Bailey. He's probably the closest like-for-like replacement for Bailey in terms of his profile and playing style, and would be best suited as a winger as part of a 4-3-3. However, there's nothing to say that Benitez wouldn't be able to increase his defensive output and play him on the right of midfield in a 4-2-3-1. So my pick out of all these options is David Neres, and I think we could get him for a reasonable fee in the high teens in terms of millions of pounds. With Antony coming through at Ajax, they'll probably be happy to sell him this season, and he's a player who could come in and start immediately, which is something we desperately need and something which these other players might not be able to offer. He's someone who's previously had a season where he scored 14 and assisted 11 in the league, which is the sort of numbers that we'd be begging for, and with James likely to leave this summer, he could more than make up for that loss in output. Also, there's one player on this list who I would desperately say we should not get, and that's Dwight McNeil, who, funnily enough, is probably the player that we've been linked the most with. I think he would be expensive, with several years still on his deal, and as an integral player to Burnley. He also doesn't really have the required pace for what we need, and also end product. He's also only ever played off the left for Burnley, and so there's no guarantee that he can play that inverted role off the right, which Bailey would have played for us. And also, as a final comment, if we expect Richarlison to leave next summer, I think Kvaratskhelia could make an excellent replacement if he continues his development at Rubin Kazan and doesn't find a new club this summer or in the winter transfer window.